Not in Culture was no longer just a hustle squeezed into Adaeze's cramped room. It was a living organism, growing, demanding, sometimes overwhelming. With Chiamaka's steady hands and Adaeze's restless energy, production flowed. Orders came in almost daily. Customers tagged her in photos. Youth groups wore her designs, and strangers began to message, "I saw your wraps somewhere. Can I order one?" It was progress, but also pressure. The pace left Adaeze exhausted. She had learned to juggle routines, to systemize, to delegate, but she still often stitched past midnight, her back aching, her eyes burning. Then came the email that would test everything she had built. A Lagos-based cultural foundation was hosting a Pan-African art festival. Delegates from across Africa were flying in. They wanted 50 custom wraps, each embroidered with a proverb from a different African region. Payment was generous, enough to cover her rent for months and expand her equipment. But the timeline? 2 weeks. Adaeze froze. 50 wraps in 14 days was almost absurd. She could decline politely, save her reputation, and continue at her current pace. Or she could risk everything: her sanity, her quality, her small reputation, on the biggest order of her life. She sat on her bed, head in her hands, fear gnawing at her chest. Then her eyes drifted to the wall. The handwritten rules stared back at her. 1. Start with what you have. 2. Do one small thing daily. 3. Build community. 4. Fix one bottleneck at a time. Her heart steadied at rule 3. Build community. She couldn't do this alone, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. That night, she called 3 women from her church fellowship, all of whom had basic sewing skills. She explained the project, promised fair pay per piece, and asked for help. They agreed eagerly. For them, it wasn't just money, it was pride. Pride in helping a young Nigerian woman put African proverbs in fabric. Pride in being part of something creative and cultural. Within days, Adaeze's small room transformed into a buzzing workshop. Stacks of fabrics in piles, needles clicked rhythmically. The air smelled of steam from irons and sachets of lavender. Chiamaka managed quality checks, the church sisters stitched hems, and Adaeze handled design layouts and embroidery. It was chaos, but it was joyful chaos. On the 10th day, exhaustion nearly broke her. Her fingers were blistered, her back ached, her mind screamed for rest. At 2 a.m., she dropped her needle, buried her face in her hands, and whispered, "Maybe I can't do this." Silence filled the room. Then she heard Chiamaka's quiet voice. "Auntie Ada, we can finish this. You've taught us to push through. Let's do it together." Adaeze lifted her head and looked around. The women were still stitching, still believing in her. Tears blurred her vision. Strength rose where weakness had lived. 2 weeks later, 50 wraps were ready, neatly packaged in brown boxes, tied with rope, each carrying a hidden proverb inside. They weren't just products, they were stories. The festival day arrived. Adaeze slipped quietly into the audience, nervous. On stage, delegates from Kenya, Ghana, Ethiopia, and beyond walked out wearing Not in Culture wraps. Cameras flashed, the crowd applauded. A Nigerian-American influencer requested 3 custom pieces for an exhibition abroad. Not in Culture had tipped from a side hustle into a recognized brand. Adaeze sat in stunned silence that night. Her rules had carried her from despair to recognition. But as she sat in her room, one thought echoed louder than all the applause. Why did I start? She hadn't begun Not in Culture to chase clout. She started because of a scrap of fabric, a spark of hope, and a desperate need to believe that small steps could lead somewhere. She pulled her notebook closer and added a final line. Rule 6. Never forget why you started. She wrote slowly, her hands steady. I didn't begin just to make money. I began to prove that momentum can be built from nothing, that scraps can become symbols, that identity and hope can be stitched into fabric. My work is more than fashion. It is a reminder that even broken pieces can be transformed. For the first time in months, Adaeze rested. Truly rested. She brewed tea, lit a small candle, and leaned back on her pillow. She was no longer the girl who once cried in darkness over rejection emails. She was a creator, a leader, a culture bearer. The tipping point wasn't the money, the festival, or the recognition. It was the moment she realized she was enough, that her small, consistent steps had carried her into a future she once thought impossible. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The fabric of momentum. Adaeze's journey teaches us a truth too often overlooked. Success doesn't come in lightning bolts. It comes in stitches, tiny, sometimes invisible acts of persistence. Momentum is not magic. It is born in chaos, nurtured in discipline, tested in storms. Her story reminds us, start with what you have, however small. Do one small thing daily. Consistency beats bursts. Build community. Don't carry the dream alone. Fix one bottleneck at a time. Progress is incremental. Be shamelessly kind, even when rejected, and never, ever forget why you started. Just as Adaeze transformed scraps into treasures, you too can transform your fragments, your setbacks, your rejections, your storms, into something powerful. Your tipping point may not come today, but every stitch matters. Every step counts. The fabric of momentum is being woven, and one day you'll look back in awe at how far those small scraps carried you.